You never expect the knife to come from the child you carried. I was standing at the kitchen sink, morning light filtering through the dusty curtains, watching cardinals dance across the frozen lawn. The same view I'd looked at for over 12 years. The house smelled like toast and lemon floor cleaner, familiar, quiet, mine in all but name. Behind me, my daughter was pouring herself coffee. Her heels clicked like judgment across the tile. And then, without warning, she said it. You should be grateful I even let you live here. 12 words. 12 tiny, ruthless words. They hit me harder than any fall I'd ever taken. Harder than the day her father left. Harder than burying my own mother without a proper goodbye. Because this was my child. The baby I nursed through colic and heartbreak, who once crawled into my bed at night whispering, "Don't ever leave me." And now, she wanted me gone. I didn't respond at first. My hand stayed in the sink, water running cold over my knuckles. I stared down at the sponge like it could explain what I'd just heard. Rachel took another sip, unfazed. I mean, let's be real. You don't pay rent. You barely help anymore. I have 3 kids to manage, a full-time job, and I can't also be your nurse. Your nurse. As if I hadn't already given her every piece of myself. As if I hadn't raised those kids while she rebuilt her life. After the divorce, after the layoffs, after she moved back into my house, then signed it into her name under the promise of making it easier for taxes. She had taken the house. She had taken my savings. She had taken my grandchildren's hugs and bedtime stories and turned them into silent nods at dinner. And now she was taking my dignity. I turned off the faucet, my fingers trembling. Slowly, I dried my hands on the towel, the same towel I'd embroidered with her initials when she was 8. I turned around, met her eyes, and I saw it. That cold distance, that convenience of forgetting everything I'd ever done for her. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded. "Thank you," I said. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of hers. They say a house is just wood and nails, but I know better. A house is memory made solid. And this house had my fingerprints in every beam, every corner, every creak and stair. It was 1988 when David and I bought it. Back then, the walls were still bare plaster, and the roof leaked when the snow melted too fast. But we didn't care. We were young, hopeful, and a little stupid in love. We planted a tree in the front yard that first spring, a red maple. It was barely taller than Rachel back then. And now it towers over the porch like it's still watching out for us. I brought my daughter home from the hospital to this house. She took her first steps in the hallway, gripping the edge of the wallpaper with sticky fingers. I taped her first crayon masterpiece to the fridge right over there. I cried in that laundry room when her dad died suddenly in 2001. Heart attack in his sleep. No warning, just silence. After David passed, everything changed. I held it together for Rachel. I worked longer hours, I clipped coupons, fixed leaky sinks with duct tape, and kept the front garden blooming because he loved it that way. Time moved on. Rachel grew up, went off to college, came home broken from a marriage that fell apart far too young. I didn't ask questions, I just made room. When she lost her job and had 2 little mouths to feed, I opened the door without hesitation. I told her, "You and the kids will always have a place here." And I meant it. So when she brought up transferring the deed into her name, just for legal protection in case anything happens to you, Mom, I didn't argue. I told myself it was just paperwork, a formality. She even joked, "This house will always be yours anyway." And I believed her, because I trusted that the love we built these walls with meant something. because I thought giving her that piece of paper couldn't possibly take away what the house actually was. But I was wrong. The day I signed over that deed, I didn't just give her a house. I gave her permission to forget whose name had built it. And slowly, almost without realizing it, she did. It happened so slowly, I didn't notice at first. One day, I was Mom, the backbone of the house, the woman who held everything together with casseroles and quiet strength. And the next, I was folding another grown man's underwear while he watched football with his shoes on my coffee table. Rachel didn't even ask anymore. She just assigned. Can you get the boys from practice? Start dinner before 5. Paul gets cranky. Oh, and don't forget Paul's work shirts. Use the delicate cycle or he'll throw a fit. Paul, my son-in-law. A man with all the warmth of a damp dish rag and none of the respect. He never said please. He never said thank you. He'd grunt when he walked in, drop his bag by the door, and expect me to clean up behind him like I was hired help. I tried not to let it get to me. I told myself I was helping. That's what mothers do, right? We help, we hold our tongues, we stay useful. But the truth is, I wasn't helping anymore. I was serving. Rachel stopped calling me Mom in front of the kids. Now I was Grandma Linda, like I was a distant relative just passing through. She started talking over me during dinner, correcting how I spoke, sighing when I offered advice. And yet, the kids, God bless them, they still came to me with their fears, their questions, their scraped knees. When Eli had nightmares, he'd tiptoe into my room and whisper, "Can I sleep with you?" When Ava had a fight with her mom, she'd crawl into my lap, still trembling, and ask me to braid her hair like I used to. Those small moments kept me breathing, because even if I wasn't Rachel's mother anymore, not in the way that mattered, I was still theirs. I was still the arms they trusted, the voice that soothed, the heart that didn't ask anything in return. And maybe that's why I stayed silent. Maybe that's why I kept scrubbing floors and folding shirts that didn't belong to me, because their love was the only thing left in that house that felt real. But even love can't keep you standing when the ground beneath you has shifted. And I was starting to feel the cracks. It was meatloaf night. I had shaped it the way Eli liked, with extra ketchup glaze on top, and mashed the potatoes smooth like Ava always asked. The salad was cold, the rolls were warm, and for a brief moment, the house felt like it used to. Until it didn't. We were all seated, plates full, forks clinking. Paul was scrolling through his phone with one hand, barely acknowledging his children. Rachel poured herself a glass of wine, then one for him, and neither looked up when I complimented the roses blooming in the front yard. I tried to join the conversation, if you could even call it that. They were talking about refinancing the car, something about interest rates and credit scores. I offered a quiet suggestion. I remember when your father and I began. Rachel cut me off without even looking up. Mom, please, you don't even understand how any of that works. Paul chuckled under his breath. Yeah, no offense, but that was like 3 economic systems ago. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Rachel kept going, voice syrupy and smug. It's okay, really. We know your head gets a little mixed up sometimes. She turned to Paul. Remember when she lost the insurance papers and blamed the mailman? They both laughed. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Slow, steady, suffocating. I hadn't lost those papers. She'd moved them during her spring cleaning binge, and I'd simply asked where they were. But now I was the joke, the confused old woman at the table she used to sit at as a child. The kids were quiet, heads down. Eli peeked at me with worried eyes. Ava pushed her peas around with her fork. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just placed my fork down, quietly, precisely, as if I was afraid even the sound of metal on porcelain would betray the storm gathering in my chest. My appetite was gone. So was something else, something that had tethered me to this house: respect. And once that's gone, love starts to rot right behind it. It had been years since anyone knocked on the back door just to see me. So when I heard the soft rap on the screen that Saturday morning, I nearly spilled my tea. I opened it to find Pastor Janice, older now, with silver strands framing her deep brown eyes, and a kindness in her smile that almost undid me on the spot. "Linda Harrow," she said, arms already open. "I've been thinking about you." We sat in the sunroom, the only quiet place left in the house. I poured us both a cup of chamomile, even though my hands shook doing it. She looked around at the neatly arranged furniture and freshly vacuumed rugs, then turned her gaze to me. Really to me? She studied my face for a long moment. Then she said it. "The light in your eyes, it's gone dim." I didn't answer right away. I looked down at my cup, watching the steam curl upward like a prayer dissolving into silence. Finally, I whispered, "It's because I don't know who I am in this house anymore." Her voice was gentle. Still a mother, still a woman of grace, still Linda. I shook my head. Number, I'm not Linda here, I'm a shadow, a background character who folds towels and keeps her mouth shut. I raised this family, Janice. I built this house with my own hands. I gave Rachel everything I had, and now, my throat caught. I hadn't cried in front of anyone in a long, long time. Now my own daughter is slowly erasing me, one chore, one silence, one humiliation at a time. Janice leaned forward and took my hand, squeezing it like we were back in Bible study, praying over someone's broken heart. "You don't deserve this," she said quietly, "and you don't have to stay invisible to prove your love." That did it. The tears came fast, hot, shameful, liberating. I covered my face with both hands, sobbing like a woman who had finally given herself permission to feel what had been eating her alive for years. Because the truth is, I hadn't told anyone. Not about the comments, not about the chores, not about the way Rachel had turned my home into her castle and me into a ghost. Until now. And somehow saying it out loud made it real. But it also made me stronger. It started with something simple, a missing water bill. I always handled the utilities. Even after signing the house over, Rachel had let me manage the small things: paying the trash collection, keeping track of the meter readings, making sure the light stayed on and the lawn sprinklers didn't rack up fees. I took pride in it. It made me feel needed. But lately, no envelopes were arriving, no statements, no due dates on the fridge, just silence. Then one afternoon, I walked out to the mailbox like I'd done for years, same quiet gravel under my slippers, same red cardinal chirping from the maple tree. But this time, the mailbox had a new addition: a lock. Silver, clean, cold. I stood there staring at it for a long minute, my own mailbox on the porch of my own home, and I couldn't open it. When I asked Rachel about it that evening, her response was light, dismissive. "Oh, that? Yeah. With all the identity theft going on, I figured it was safer. Don't worry, it's just junk mail anyway." I pressed gently. "What about the water bill and the gas? I haven't seen—" She cut me off with a wave of her hand. "I've got it covered, Mom. You don't need to worry yourself with that anymore." Worry myself, like I was a child, like responsibility was now beyond my grasp. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more things. The bills no longer had my name on them. The insurance documents on the counter, all addressed to Rachel Summers. The property tax slip that had come every spring like clockwork, gone, erased, redirected. They weren't just keeping information from me. They were erasing me from the records. And what scared me most wasn't the lack of control. It was the creeping realization that legally I no longer existed in this house. I wasn't on the deed. I wasn't on the bills. And if they wanted me gone, there would be no paper trail to say I ever mattered here at all. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the kind where the sun spills in just right and the house feels quiet enough to breathe. Ava and Eli had come home from school, backpacks dropped at the door, and I'd made their favorite, peanut butter cookies, soft in the middle. We were sitting on the living room rug, building a puzzle of the solar system, Ava naming each planet with that proud sparkle in her eyes. For a brief moment, everything felt like it used to. Then Rachel walked in. Her heels clicked sharp against the floor, slicing through the quiet like a blade. She stood there in the doorway, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. I looked up and smiled. We're almost done with Saturn. Ava remembered the rings all by herself. Rachel didn't smile back. Instead, she said it, flat, cold. They're not your kids, Mom. The words landed heavy, like stones thrown at a stained glass window. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. What? I asked quietly. She stepped forward. I said, they're my children, and I don't appreciate you trying to act like they're yours. You've had your time. You're just confusing them. Eli's head shot up. Ava's hands froze on the puzzle piece. The room, once full of warmth, went ice cold. Rachel kept going. You don't get to make the rules. You don't get to discipline them, teach them, or act like you're the parent. That's over. You're not raising them. You're not raising anything. I stood slowly, my knees stiff from the floor. I'm not trying to take over, I said, my voice shaken. I'm just being their grandmother. I'm loving them. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Number, you're trying to hold on to something that's already gone. You're just a shadow from the past, Mom, and you need to stop confusing them with your nostalgia. Ava stood up and slipped her hand into mine. I felt her squeeze. And that small gesture, that tiny act of defiance, was enough to keep me from breaking. Rachel turned on her heel and left the room. I sat down again, trying to keep my voice steady as Eli crawled back into my lap, but inside I was unraveling, because she wasn't just trying to push me out of the house, she was trying to erase me from the hearts I had helped shape, and that kind of cruelty doesn't happen by accident. Sometimes, when the world refuses to listen, the only thing left to do is right. That evening, after the puzzle sat half finished on the living room floor and the house had gone quiet, I opened the hallway closet and reached behind the old holiday boxes. There, tucked between forgotten decorations and a dusty sewing kit, was an empty leather-bound journal I'd never used. I carried it back to my room like it was made of glass. I sat down at my desk, turned on the small reading lamp, and opened to the first page. I'm going to start with the day we bought this house, I whispered to no one, and I wrote, 1988. David and I signed the papers on a rainy Tuesday. I wore a blue blouse with a chipped button, and he held my hand the whole time. We were scared, but it felt like building something permanent, something sacred. I kept writing about Rachel's first steps in the hallway, about the summer Ava was born, and how I painted her nursery while Rachel cried from exhaustion. Then I turned to the now, the date, the hour, the words Rachel had spoken to me at the dinner table, the way Paul had laughed, the exact sentence she used when she told me I was a shadow, the way the mailbox now had a lock. Every insult, every dismissal, every slowly drawn line meant to push me out of my own story. I wrote them all down, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to prove, even if only to myself, that I had been here, that I wasn't imagining it, that the erasure of someone doesn't happen with a single cruel word, but with 1,000 cuts that no one else sees. I would write it all, because paper doesn't flinch, ink doesn't interrupt. And the truth, when written, becomes harder to deny. I wasn't sure what this journal would become: a record, a lifeline, maybe even a weapon. But as I closed the cover that night and placed it gently in my drawer, one thing was certain. They could lock the mailbox. They could shut me out of the bills, the bedtime stories, the family decisions, but they would not shut me out of the truth. I never imagined I'd be a guest in the house I once called mine, but that night I became something even less than that. Rachel came home late, still in her work heels, her energy sharp and purposeful. She didn't bother with pleasantries, just marched into the living room where I was folding laundry and said, "We're having guests this weekend. You'll need to move out of your room." I looked up, confused. "Out of my, what do you mean?" She didn't blink. "Paul's brother and his wife. They'll be staying a few nights and they need a proper bed. It wouldn't make sense for them to be down in the basement." I sat there, the towel in my hands, frozen mid-fold. "You're moving me to the basement?" I asked softly. She crossed her arms. "It's temporary. You'll be fine. There's an old mattress down there. Just throw some sheets on it. And there's space for your things in those storage bins if you're organized." She turned to leave like the conversation was over. And just like that, it was. I stood in my doorway that night, staring at the room I had slept in for over a decade, the window with the lace curtains I stitched myself, the dresser with David's old cufflinks still in the top drawer, the photo of Rachel as a child in a popsicle-stained sundress, smiling like the world hadn't yet taught her to forget kindness. Gone. Claimed. I gathered what I could: a few clothes, my journal, the framed photo of the grandkids, and carried them down into the cold belly of the house. The basement smelled like dust and rusted pipe. The bed was a sunken foam mattress on a metal frame, pushed between stacked Christmas decorations and a broken elliptical no one had used since 2014. There were no windows, no door, no dignity. I sat on the edge of that mattress, listening to footsteps upstairs, and felt the chill settle into my bones. They hadn't just taken my room. They had taken the last space in this house where I was still allowed to dream. It took me 3 weeks to build up the courage to make the appointment. The manila folder in my hands was worn at the edges, filled with old copies of documents I barely understood anymore: deed transfers, bank printouts, a scanned version of the live-in trust Rachel had insisted on drafting. I carried it like it might burst into flames if I let go. The office hadn't changed much. Same oak paneling, same dusty bookshelf with the leaning clock that hadn't worked since 2011. The name on the door was still etched in gold: Martin Dryson, Esquire. He'd been our family lawyer for nearly 30 years. When David died, Martin handled everything. When Rachel went off to college, he reviewed the loan papers. And when she asked me to transfer the deed just for simplicity, it was Martin who filed it. He stood when I entered, his kind eyes narrowing behind his thick glasses. "Linda Harrow," he said warmly, gesturing me inside. "Been a long time." I sat across from him, folder in my lap, hands knotted tight. "I need help," I said, "and I don't know if I have the right to ask for it anymore." He tilted his head. "Start from the beginning." So I did. I told him how Rachel came back after her divorce, how I welcomed her and the kids with open arms, how I sold my car, cashed out part of my savings, and helped them stay afloat, how she asked for the house to be in her name just in case, how she promised nothing would change, that I'd always have my space. And then I told him what had changed: the chores, the locked mailbox, the insults, the basement. I didn't cry. I kept my voice steady, but something in me cracked open as I said the words out loud, like pressing gently on a bruise and finding the pain was deeper than you thought. Martin leaned forward, fingers steepled under his chin. Linda, he said quietly, was this transfer done under pressure? Did you feel forced? I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Because how do you explain the kind of pressure that doesn't shout, but whispers, that smiles while it corners you, that uses love like leverage? I looked down at my lap, my throat tightened. Um, I don't know, I said finally. Maybe not at first, but now, it feels like I signed myself out of my own life. Martin nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not pitied, seen. The past has a way of sitting in front of you like it's brand new. Martin opened the folder I'd brought, spreading the documents carefully across his desk. His eyes moved slowly, deliberately, scanning every signature, every notarized stamp, every date. I sat quietly across from him, my palms resting on my knees, trying to stay still. The ticking of the broken wall clock was silent, but in my mind I could hear every second. Then he stopped, finger tapping the top right corner of one page. This transfer, he said, looking up, was filed the same week you were released from the hospital. I blinked. From the pneumonia? He nodded. Yes, according to this, the paperwork was signed 3 days after your discharge. You were still recovering. I tried to remember that week. The fog in my head, the endless fatigue, Rachel bringing me tea with pills already crushed inside, her saying, "Don't worry about the house stuff, just signing and I'll take care of the rest." Martin leaned back in his chair, his voice calm but firmer now. If we're looking at consent, this time it matters. If you were unwell, possibly medicated, and unaware of the legal consequences, your capacity to sign, your ability to give informed consent can be challenged. I stared at the deed. My own signature looked foreign to me now, slanted, rushed, like a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. He continued, "Do you remember discussing this transfer in detail? Were you given time to review it? Did you have independent counsel?" I shook my head slowly. "Number Rachel said you were handling it. I trusted her." Martin's lips pressed together. "Trust doesn't negate coercion, Linda. If you were manipulated, emotionally or otherwise, there may be a case here." A case. The word felt strange in the air, like justice was something I'd forgotten I was allowed to imagine. For the first time in years, I looked at that piece of paper and didn't feel small. I felt angry, and underneath that anger, something more dangerous, hope. The basement was colder than usual that night. I had bundled myself in 3 blankets, curled up on the creaky mattress beside the old Christmas boxes, trying to read by the dim glow of a clip-on lamp. I wasn't reading, really, just staring at the same page, eyes too tired to focus, mind too full to rest. Then I heard it, soft, hesitant footsteps on the stairs. I sat up, heart quickening. At first, I thought it was Rachel, come to scold me for something else I hadn't done. But then I saw her, Emily, only 8 years old, in her little unicorn pajamas, clutching a frayed stuffed rabbit to her chest. She stood halfway down the stairs, eyes wide, small bare feet shivering against the concrete. "Emily?" I whispered. "What are you doing down here, sweetheart?" She came down the last few steps slowly and climbed onto the bed beside me without asking. Her little body was trembling, not from cold, from something deeper. She leaned in close and whispered, almost like she was afraid someone upstairs might hear, "Grandma, are you okay?" I smiled gently and ran my hand over her hair. "Of course I am, my darling. Just a little chilly down here. She looked up at me then, and her voice cracked. Does Mom still love you? My heart clenched so hard I thought I might stop breathing. I opened my mouth to say yes, to say of course, to lie, the way I'd been lying to myself for far too long, but nothing came out. 'Cause what do you say when your grandchild has seen more truth in 8 years than her mother has chosen to face in 30? Instead, I pulled her close, held her tightly, let her rest her head on my shoulder the way Rachel used to before walls and resentment and power replaced innocence. She whispered again, smaller this time. She says mean things to you. I closed my eyes. I know, baby. Emily sniffled. You don't deserve that. Tears came before I could stop them, silent, hot, heavy, not because of the pain, but because in that moment someone saw me. Someone small and soft and full of truth saw that I was hurting and cared. I kissed her forehead and whispered, You are a very brave girl. She nodded against me, and we stayed like that for a long while, two hearts beating against the silence, in a house where love had been misplaced but not lost. I didn't know she'd done it until after the fact. Pastor Janice came by again the following week, this time unannounced, holding a small tin of lemon cookies and something else in her eyes. Something quieter, firmer. She sat across from me in the sunroom, glancing toward the hallway as if to make sure no one was listening. Rachel was out with Paul at a dinner party. The house was calm for once. Janice didn't waste time. I need to tell you something, she said, voice low. I called Adult Protective Services. I blinked. You, what? She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. I didn't do it to betray you. I did it because I've watched enough suffering in silence to know what it looks like. And what you're living in? Linda, it isn't just unfair, it's abuse. The word rang out like thunder, heavy, uncomfortable, necessary. I'm not being hit, I whispered, almost defensively. No, she said, but you're being erased, controlled, humiliated. That's psychological abuse, Linda. You've been isolated, stripped of your rights, pushed into a basement, and treated like a servant. That's not caregiving. That's cruelty wrapped in obligation. I looked away, the tears already threatening. I'd written every offense down in my journal, but hearing someone else name it, say it out loud, made it real in a way ink never could. They'll be sending someone, she continued. Not the police, just a social worker. They'll want to speak to you privately, assess the situation. What if Rachel finds out? I asked. Janice didn't blink. Then we protect you. Simple, as if it were obvious. For so long, I'd convinced myself that speaking up would make things worse, that suffering quietly was the cost of love. But maybe, just maybe, silence wasn't strength. Maybe silence was surrender. And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't have to surrender anymore. The storm came fast. It was the next morning, cloudy, thick with humidity, like even the air knew something was about to snap. I was folding a blanket in the living room when Rachel burst through the front door, slamming it so hard the frame rattled. Her heels struck the floor like gunshots. Did you call APS on me? I froze, heart pounding. She didn't wait for an answer. Did you seriously report me, your daughter? After everything I've done for you? Her face was red, her voice rising by the second. Paul lingered behind her, arms crossed, trying to look detached. But even he looked uncomfortable. I gave you a place to live. I gave you food. And this is how you repay me? With threats? With lawyers? Are you trying to take me to court now? The words flew like knives. For a moment, I almost fell back into the silence, almost let it wash over me like I always had. But something in me had shifted. I stood straight. My voice came out steady even. You didn't give me a place to live, Rachel. She blinked, caught off guard. I gave you a place to grow. I gave you a home before you even had a name for it. I gave you my time, my hands, my body, my savings. I gave you everything I had without question. And yes, I stepped forward now, chest rising. Yes, I spoke to a lawyer. And yes, someone from the state is coming to ask questions. Because this, what you've done to me, it isn't care, it's control. Her mouth opened, ready to fire again, but I didn't let her. You think you gave me this house? I said, voice sharpening. I built this house. I scrubbed the floors of this house while you played with dolls. I kept the lights on, paid the bills, made the beds. You think giving me a mattress in the basement means you've done your part? Rachel's voice cracked as she shouted, I did what I had to do. You act like the victim, but you're the one making this messy. You want to take your own daughter to court. I stared at her. Then I said the one thing that had lived in my chest for too long. No, Rachel, I don't want to take you to court. I want my daughter back. Silence fell like ash. Then I added, softer but unshaken, you keep saying you gave me this life, but the truth is I gave you life. She looked stunned, not remorseful, just stunned, like she hadn't expected me to fight back, like my voice had become foreign to her. But it wasn't foreign. It was mine. Courtrooms are colder than I expected, not the kind of cold that makes your hands shiver, the kind that lives in the walls, the kind that reminds you this is a place where truth stands bare, whether you're ready for it or not. I sat quietly beside my attorney, hands folded around my worn leather journal. I could feel Rachel's eyes on me from across the room, but I didn't look at her. I had spent too long looking to her for love. Now I was looking for justice. When they called my name, I rose slowly, knees stiff but back straight, and walked to the witness stand. I took the oath, and when they asked me to speak, I didn't start with accusations. I started with memory. I bought this house with my husband in 1988, I said. We raised our daughter there. We buried my husband's cufflinks in the back garden because my granddaughter believed it would keep him close. Soft murmurs in the room. I held up the journal. In this book is every detail I could remember, every word, every insult, every date I was moved from a bedroom to a basement, every night I spent listening to my granddaughter cry, every time I was told I was confused when I was only tired, every time I was asked to be quiet when what I needed was to be heard. My voice didn't shake, it couldn't. I'm not here because of one moment, I said. I'm here because of hundreds of small moments that built a wall around me until I could no longer breathe in my own home. My lawyer stood and turned to the judge. Your Honor, he said, voice clear and steady, this is not a simple family dispute. This is a case of elder psychological abuse, coercion, and asset manipulation. This woman didn't lose a house. She was stripped of dignity, of space, of voice. He gestured toward me. She doesn't need a home. She needs her name restored. She needs protection. She needs justice. The judge nodded slowly, took notes. Across the courtroom, Rachel's posture was shrinking by the second. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. The day the judgment came down, I didn't expect anything dramatic. No gavel slam, no gasps in the gallery, just words, dry, formal, heavy with meaning. But sometimes words are all it takes to change everything. The judge flipped through the final paperwork, adjusted his glasses, and looked at me first. Then Rachel. He cleared his throat. After review of the testimony, supporting evidence, and legal counsel from both parties, this court found that the property transfer in question was executed under conditions that raise concern for undue influence and diminish consent. I held my breath. Effective immediately, joint ownership of the property will be restored. split 50-50 between Ms. Rachel Summers and Ms. Linda Harrow. The courtroom spun slightly. My hand gripped the edge of the bench to steady myself, but he wasn't finished. Furthermore, in regard to interpersonal access, the court finds no grounds to restrict or discourage contact between Ms. Harrow and her grandchildren. Given the evidence of emotional significance and mutual attachment, structured visitation rights are to be implemented immediately. Rachel flinched. For once, she didn't speak. She didn't storm, she didn't object, because she couldn't. All those years she spent building walls, tightening locks, pushing me out of my own life. And now, with one ruling, the court had handed me back not just a portion of my home, but something far more sacred, my place in my grandchildren's hearts, the right to be present, to be seen. When we stepped outside, the sun was softer than I remembered it, like the world had been holding its breath along with me. My lawyer patted my shoulder. "You didn't just win property," he said. "You reclaimed your personhood." I nodded. I didn't cry. Not then. But later that night, when Emily ran to me after school and wrapped her arms around my waist without asking permission, I did, quietly, gratefully, because I was home. The door creaked just the same chipped paint on the frame, same old brass knob, worn smooth from years of coming and going. But this time, when I opened it, it didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a homecoming. My old bedroom, the one Rachel had claimed for guests, the one I'd quietly been exiled from, was mine again. The judge hadn't just ruled on paper, he'd ruled on space, on presence. And now I was allowed to exist again, fully in the house I had once helped build. The sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, the very ones I had sewn back when Rachel was still a teenager. The scent of lavender sachets I'd tucked into the drawers still lingered faintly. My quilt, folded and stored for years in a plastic bin, now lay spread across the bed like it had never left. I stood in the doorway for a long time, not moving, just breathing, just remembering what it felt like to be wanted in a room, not just tolerated. I placed my journal on the nightstand, then unpacked my things slowly, reverently, like someone blessing a space. Each item I touched was more than fabric or furniture. It was a declaration: I am here, I belong. When night finally came, I lay beneath the familiar ceiling and listened, not to shouting, not to footsteps overhead, but to the quiet hum of a house no longer built on fear. Then I reached for my journal. I turned to a fresh page, dated it carefully, and wrote with steady hands: I am not invisible anymore. I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and sank into the mattress like it was holding me in return. No more basements, no more whispered apologies to walls, just me, above ground, alive, and finally seen. I found it just after breakfast. The morning light poured in soft and golden, brushing over the quilt like a quiet blessing. I was tidying the pillows when I noticed a small piece of folded paper tucked beneath the corner of the top sheet, plain white, written in pink marker with slightly crooked letters. It was Emily's handwriting. I sat down on the edge of the bed, unfolded it carefully, and read, Grandma, you are my safe place. Always. That was all. 7 words. But they hit harder than any ruling, any court order, any apology that had never come. I pressed the note to my chest, and suddenly, without warning, the sobs came. The kind that start slow and then wash over you like a wave that's been building for years. I curled into the pillow, clinging to that scrap of paper like it was a lifeline, because it was. Emily didn't know what those words meant, not in a legal sense, not in a fight over a house sense, but she knew what love was. She knew what safety felt like. And somehow, even through all the tension and closed doors and whispered arguments, she wasn't meant to hear she had seen me, not the version Rachel described, not the burden or the problem or the woman who needed to be managed. Just Grandma, just the arms that always opened, the voice that never shouted, the lap that never turned her away, her safe place. I held that note like it was gold, because in a world where my name had been written out of deeds, out of mail, out of respect, here was one person who wrote me back in. I didn't need the whole house, I didn't need the title. In that moment, I had everything. She didn't slam the door this time. She packed in silence, sharp, mechanical movements, the way someone moves when they're trying not to feel anything. I watched from the top of the stairs as she carried boxes out to the car. Paul wasn't with her. He had left the week before, muttering something about needing space. The last thing she took was a painting from the hallway, one I'd painted years ago of a red barn in the snow. She looked at it for a long time before slipping it into the back seat without a word. Then she stood in the doorway, staring up toward the landing. Her voice was flat, dry. "I'm not playing this little theater anymore." I said nothing. There was no victory in this moment, no joy, just the quiet sting of a truth finally spoken aloud. She didn't want the house. She wanted control. And when that was gone, so was she. She turned and left, the screen door creaking, once before clicking shut behind her. I listened to the car engine start, the tires crunch down the driveway, and then nothing. Just wind through the maple tree. The next morning, I made pancakes, real ones with chocolate chips and cinnamon the way the kids liked. At exactly 10:02 a.m., the doorbell rang. It was Paul, surprisingly, with Ava and Emily in tow. He barely looked me in the eye, just muttered, "She said they could stay the weekend." Emily hugged me first, then Ava, quieter but just as tight. We spent that Saturday baking cookies and reading under blankets in the living room. No tension, no footsteps overhead, just laughter and crumbs and music from an old record player that hadn't been touched in years. That night when I tucked them in, Ava asked, "Can we stay next weekend too?" I smiled. "As long as you want, sweetheart." Because the house may not have been whole, but it was healing, and for the first time in a long time, there was room for love again. The kitchen smells like vanilla and melting chocolate chips. Sunlight spills across the countertops, catching little specks of flour in the air like dust motes in a snow globe. Emily stands on a stool, her tongue poking out as she carefully spoons dough onto the tray. Ava hums softly, reaching for another handful of walnuts. The record player in the corner plays a scratchy old tune, something soft, something familiar, and I am whole. I wipe my hands on a dish towel and lean against the counter, watching them, these girls, these miracles. For a long time, I thought I had lost everything. I thought that when Rachel pushed me into the basement, when the mail stopped coming in my name, when my voice was silenced at the dinner table, I thought that was the end. I thought I was fading. But now I know better. Now I know I didn't need to fight to reclaim every inch of space or every scrap of furniture. What I needed, what I deserved, was to reclaim myself, and I did. I found my voice in a journal no one could edit. I found my strength in a courtroom where the truth finally stood up straight. I found my heart in the arms of two children who never stopped seeing me, even when the grown-ups tried to make me invisible. As Emily slides the tray into the oven, she turns to me and asks, "Grandma, did you really think the house was gone forever?" I smile. I kneel beside her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "No, sweetheart, not anymore." I glance around the kitchen, my kitchen. The calendar with the family birthdays still hangs on the wall. The coffee mug with my name, etched in fading gold, still rests by the sink. The quilted oven mitts, the chipped cookie jar, the tiny cracks in the tile from years of life, lived honestly. They're all still here. I thought I lost the house, I say quietly, but what I really lost was my place inside it. And it turns out, I pause, letting the words settle into the space between us. All I had to do was call myself back. Emily doesn't fully understand. Not yet, but she wraps her arms around me anyway, and that's enough. I rise slowly, take a deep breath, and say it aloud, not just for her or for Ava or for the ghosts of what came before, but for me. This is still my home, and this time no one argues. No one dares, because this home remembers me, and I have finally remembered myself.